and a very warm welcome to all of you. By way of introduction, I am Isha Manyar, the executive editor at Rolly Books, the very proud publishers of Syeda Imam's Like Fine Wine, 9 real, rare love stories. I'm also the editor of Like Fine Wine. I'm so glad all of you could join us for what promises to be a very special evening where we celebrate the book coming out into the world. It took a long time. And like fine wine often does. It has been an absolute honor editing Saida. We spent many hours over the phone between Bombay and Delhi, arguing, giggling, confused, glad for each other. In that sense, ours was nothing short of a romance of its own kind, and I wouldn't have it any other way. So, without flattery or embellishment, I can safely say that this evening we have my favorite author in discussion with the eminent Dr. Karan Singh, another Roli favorite Meera Ali, and the brilliant Pragya Tiwari. A little bit about the four before we start, although they really need no introductions. Dr. Karan Singh is an Indian politician, philanthropist, and poet. He belongs to the Dogra dynasty and is the son of Maharaja Hari Singh. He was a member of the Rajya Sabha and has served as president, Sadr-e-Riyasat, and governor of Jammu and Kashmir. He received the Padma Vibhushan in 2005 and has authored over 20 books. I would be remiss here if I didn't mention that his is one of the most endearing stories in the book. Syeda Bilgrami Imam is an award-winning writer and editor of The Making of Advertising, The Positive Side, and The Untold Charminar. Born in Hyderabad, she was a fellow of English literature at Bombay's Elphinstone College. After working as executive creative editor at India's three foremost advertising agencies, Syeda joined the government of India in the Ministry of Minority Affairs and External Affairs. Like Fine Wine is now her book of stories about a few unmissable lives and loves. Meera Ali studied architecture at the Institute of Environmental Design, Gujarat. A designer and producer of the feature film Janisar, Meera manages the couture label Kotwara with her husband Muzaffar Ali. Together, they have also set up Mashra, an Avadi dining experience. In conversation with them is Pragya Tiwari, a journalist who has written extensively on politics, identity, policy, and culture, and has edited several publications, including Tehelka, The Big Indian Picture, and Vice. She currently works as a policy and culture consultant and is also the creative director of Ojio Media and co-founder of the Indian History Collective. Thank you, all of you, for your time, for your passion, and for what's about to be a wonderful Friday evening. I now invite our director, Priya Kapoor, to present all four of them with copies of the book. And now, without further ado, I hope everyone's got their drinks in their seats. Over to Pragya.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for coming out. It's a fine evening, as as befits this book. It's really a wonderful book. So I'm going to start by congratulating Syeda for writing this fantastic book. And I think there's so much to unpack in this book, so much to talk about that I'm going to start straight away. But before we delve into some of the fantastic stories in this book, I want to first ask you, Syeda, what is it that made you take this up? What were you looking to explore? I mean, love stories are all around us. We're a nation of love stories. But to do this in book form, what was the thought behind that?
Most things in my life are designed by accident. And I think, in fact, the first title for this book was designed by accident. Because a full-page Sunday Times edition of an essay came out on Sir Ali Imam. And it said about 5 or 6 times in the course of the essay what an extraordinary man he was. He was an extraordinary viceroy's counselor. He was he divided Bengal and Bihar in the most fantastic way. He brought the Executive Council to Hyderabad. So the word extraordinary was repeated umpteen times, and the last time it said, and his marriage to Lady Anis Imam was indeed extremely extraordinary. So, for publisher printing, actually she's not a publisher, she's just a good friend of mine who's very interested in books. Namita Gokhale said, you've got to write about this because you know the story, obviously. Isn't this the lady who spoils Askari rotten? Askari happens to be my husband, and he was spoiled rotten. So he said, isn't this the lady? You must have. I said, I do know the story. So they said, but you've got to write it. And you know, I'm a commissar. I'm a working person. So I used to work pretty hard in my job in advertising. I said, I can't do anything. I said, just one monograph, which I did. And I did it as because she did spoil Askari rotten, but she did a lot of confiding in me because I used to spend a great deal of time with her, and because of the Hyderabad connection, she just came out with everything, which otherwise she was a very private person. And so I wrote it, and everybody clamored that this has now got to be a book. But for heaven's sake, I mean, you know, one extraordinary person in their lives, and how am I going to make it a book? So I asked for patience, and I got plenty of it. I have to say that really books is extraordinary and elegant about how patient they are. There's one of the things I decided to do was actually to make everybody in the book almost as extraordinary as the original Sir Ali, because one of the things I did not do in the book that you're going to read is any ancestor worship. But as a matter of fact, this man was really unusually interesting for a granddaughter-in-law because he stood up to the British. And because he was such a successful and trusted viceroy's counselor, everybody sort of said he must be very pro-British, which is why he's so successful. As a matter of fact, he was forever putting down, I mean, in very many ways whenever he could. For instance, and I think you'll laugh at this story, but he was Prime Minister of Hyderabad, and the Prince of Wales said he's got to visit India and he must go to Hyderabad. And every pomp and ceremony should be laid out for him. And the Crown requested that the Prime Minister, who's Sir Ali, should have the Nizam go to actually receive the Prince of Wales. Sir Ali said no. The Nizam will not go to fetch the prince from the station. They said, this is a request from the Crown. You are meant to do this and you will do it. And Sir Ali said, no, my boss is a king and he does not go to stations to receive princes. The Prince of Berar will go, I as his first servant will go, the entire cabinet will go, there will be a 21-gun salute, but the Nizam will not go to the railway station. The governor said, Sir Ali, you're designated to be the governor of Bihar after you finish your term in Hyderabad. And he expected an immediate yes to his request. And Sir Ali said, I'll be a much wealthier man if I go back to my practice of law and as a matter of fact don't accept the governorship of Bihar. And the Nizam did not go to the station. So, and typically, one of the things which I'm very proud of that he did was that the British were forever trying to get the states to secede their state because they were very, very clever at it. And he managed to do that with very many states, but he prevented that in Benares. He prevented that in state after state. So every one of the princes used to feel that, gosh, this man is our savior. And then he turned around and said to the viceroy that actually your monarch, our monarch, cannot call himself emperor. There is a legal problem here. I'm pointing it out to you. It's a serious problem. uh, he cannot, George V cannot call himself the emperor because he has no king in his kingdom. And if you don't have a king in your kingdom, you cannot possibly be emperor. And the viceroy was most, I mean, he's a totally troublemaking counselor. So he said, so he said, well, I have a solution for you. I mean, we can't have a disgrace of saying withdrawing the title from a king, but I think what I'm going to petition to you is that you declare the Nizam as a king, because his state is larger than France. He has this kind of tax revenue and all the various legal things which made him qualify Hyderabad as a kingdom. And if the Nizam is declared king, then George V can be an emperor. And so let's do it. So in fact, he went and discussed this with George V, who said the parliament has to pass it, and so on. So I mean, these sort of stories, you grew up with, and I was very tempted to write them in the book, but I didn't, because I consider that a sort of embarrassment in terms of, as I said, ancestor worship. But what I think, what I wanted to do thereafter as a result was that I wanted all the stories, because Rowley Books were very keen that I should do now a book, right? And I wanted the people in the book to be of that kind of unafraid integrity and character, and there had to be something very special about them. And I have to say that I did manage, I think, to do that, because I think you've seen the list. I'm going to rattle off the list for you, or maybe Pragya, you should do that, of the people who are there, and each one of them and the other thing was that I wanted it to be an all-India thing. I wanted, there's Kashmir, there's Himachal, there's UP, there's even Chennai. I mean, Viswanathan Anand and his wife Aruna, the chess player belongs thankfully to Chennai. So there's no part of the country that hasn't actually been covered. Enough said.
Well, two of the extraordinary people featured in your book are with us, and we're very lucky to have them. I'm going to start with you, Meera. I wonder what the process was like. I mean, what made you agree to do this, and what the process was like to begin with, to recount such a complex and personal history. I mean, if somebody sat me down and said, I've been married just a couple of years, to really go through everything about my relationship, there's just so much it brings up. I wonder what that was like for you.
Actually, what should I say? Syeda is very charming and she's very persuasive. You cannot say no to her. I'm sure Dr. Karan Singh agrees with me. And I think that has, to my mind, that is one single most important characteristic of a person is, and the most enjoyable characteristic of a person is that they charm you into saying anything, even things that you don't think you should be. But the good thing about Syeda is that you can trust her. She's not going to make twist things just to make them sensational. She is very perceptive and she is very clear-headed. So when she sat Muzaffar and me down to ask us a few questions, it was very easy to open up to her. And Muzaffar has known her since the 60s, I think.
Yeah.
And
60.
so,
Yeah.
they go a long way back. They've known each other, and he has seen her and her absolutely delightful husband Askari over so many decades. And so it was really a wonderful experience to talk to somebody who felt like she was the right person. Otherwise, like you said, it's very difficult to open about your your personal life and why do you like your husband, why don't you like your husband. You can't answer these questions. They are rather personal, but she didn't treat it like that. It was no such thing. It became very natural. And because she understands Muzaffar, and to an extent me, I have also known her for the last 30 years now, it was a relatively easy journey to take. I remember the first time Muzaffar told me about Syeda and Askari in the 60s. He was working in an advertising agency in Calcutta and Clarion McCann, and he used to take a ride in Askari's car to the office because he used to drop him. And so he used to reach their house on time, and every day he used to wait for 1 hour for Saida to get ready and come out of. And he said every day she came out, she was like a breath of fresh air. So that's Saida for you.
Dr. Singh, you know, one's known of you in public life, one's read so much of you, of the stuff that you've written, your books. But I think that that little portrait that Saida paints of you in this book was, to borrow a phrase from Muzaffar, a breath of fresh air. I mean, I was just looking at you in wonderful new light, and I thought it was such a tender portrait, both of you and your relationship. One of the first things that I wanted to that struck me when I was reading that story is that when you met your wife, you were both teenagers, as was custom in those days. And I wonder if there was any way you thought that that seed that was being planted there, what it might blossom into. Did you have a notion of what you wanted it to become, or did it just become this extraordinary thing by itself?
I didn't have the faintest notion, let me tell you. What happened was, when we were married, she was 13 and I was 19. And the marriage was in Bombay, because both our dynasties had been, taken out of their state. My father had to leave Jammu and Kashmir, and Maharaja Mohan Shamsher, her grandfather, had to leave Nepal. So we get married neither in Kashmir nor in Nepal. So Bombay was where my father lived. We had on Nepean Road, we had a lovely house, and the wedding took place in Kutch Castle, which is on Nepean Sea Road. It was a short walk for the Barat. No, but when I came back from America, I was in America for my treatment. When I came back, oddly enough, I had been engaged to somebody else earlier. And when I came back, I discovered to my surprise, I didn't know that girl Weber, that engagement has been broken. And now there's somebody else they want me to meet. Ab un dinon mein to unki chalti thi. Nobody asked us. He said, no, we want you to meet her. So Faridkot House jo hai Delhi mein, which is I think a government office or something now. We met over lunch, and she was very pretty. She was only 12 plus at the time. But Nepali girls get very pretty very early. And I said yes, I obviously would say yes, but if you say I had any idea that we were going to be married for 60 years, and Asha stayed with me and passed away in the 60th year of our wedding, I had no idea whatsoever.
There's a fantastic nugget in the book about Sardar Patel playing a small role in this union. Could you tell us about that?
Well, it's never been actually confirmed. There was a view that Sardar Patel wanted India-Nepal relations to be strengthened, and that therefore this would be some kind of a marriage between Nepal. But unfortunately, by that time, Maharaja Mohan had already gone. He had been unseated with that coup, and the Shahs were back. But they say that Sardar Patel, but what I owe Sardar Patel is the fact, I had this problem with my hip, and I was in plaster of Paris for 6 months in India, and he came to Jammu and asked my father, why is this boy in? He said, he's been treated as 6 mahine se kuch ho nahi. He said, Maharaj Sahab, send him immediately to America. If you don't send him to America, he'll never walk for the rest of his life. So within 10 days it was arranged. I flew to America, and thanks to Sardar Patel, I was able not only to walk again, I even played tennis with a good doubles partner. I played golf, and I could walk. I can still walk around. I mean, I've carried a limp all my life, but the fact that I'm still mobile at the age of 92 is thanks largely to Sardar Patel. That's how I remember.
92 on the 9th, I might add.
I'm going to come back to something from there, but Meera, I just wanted to bring you in here. You met Muzaffar Saab in your office. You were a young architect then. And, the book, as I was telling Syeda earlier, each one of these stories could have been a book in itself, right? So the story, the monograph skips a beat, and then, you were part of a shoot. And it seems that you, very early on in that shoot, you were convinced that you were in love with him. And I wonder, I was reading Nirmal Verma this morning, and he writes in one of his essays about how the beginning is never the beginning, and there's so many beginnings concealed in a beginning, like a Russian doll. So I've often wondered about falling in love when that moment occurs. What do you remember of it? How do you remember feeling so sure that you were in love with this man?
Actually, that's a very difficult thing to answer because I don't think anybody here, I'm sure there are at least 100 love stories right here. And I don't think it's very. Can any one of you say the moment you fell in love? It's. I mean, it works in books, yes. There is a moment that the person feels they've fallen in love, but in reality, I'm not sure if it works like that because uh, I know that I met this person and we went to shoot for a film in Ajmer. We spent a week there, and when we came back, I was 100% sure I was in love, but I have no idea which day or hour of that week and why and when it happened. But I think it may not have happened if I had not spent a whole week, so closely with a person. You eat together, you work together. Since we were on a shoot, it was like from crack of dawn till the light was there, and then you unwind with the whole unit, and you have your dinner together, and then you plan for the next day, and then again you meet. So it's you're with each other 24/7, and if in the first week of your meeting somebody you feel so strongly, then I think, at least I thought, that that really meant something, because going out on a date and meeting somebody and then meeting them again after a week, you always put your best foot forward and your true self is never revealed. Also, I think in this situation, it was not like just two of us, it was a group of people, a unit. So how a person reacts and engages with each and every person in that unit, whether it's a spot boy whose job is just to carry your bag, or it's an artist, or it's the cinematographer, it makes you understand the personality of that person and what they really are, because each one of these relationships reveals the character of both the people who are in this relationship, working relationship, or whatever it is. So many facets of Muzaffar were revealed to me in that one week, that it turned into this very beautiful relationship.
Meera, it's one thing to fall in love, and perhaps uh, quite something else to decide to spend your life with them. And that too in your kind of circumstances, where any number of people wanted to dissuade you from doing so, including your own family. So much so that you had to elope, and there's this wonderful moment. I mean, wonderful is a strange word, but heartbreaking moment that Saida writes about, when you tell your parents that you've been married and you're in tears. Um, Looking back now, I mean, I'm sure it was all a blur at that point in time. You were just doing what you thought you should. But looking back now, what gave you the conviction um, to do what you did? And of course, it's a decision that's been vindicated. But can you tell what that young woman was driven by?
Mhm.
Actually, yes, it was a very difficult decision to make because, especially for a girl, to go against her parents' wishes is very, very difficult. These days, you see young people are so independent and they want to do what they want to do, but for a girl, it's very difficult. And especially, the relationship that a girl has with a father, it's a very special bond. So it was, I think I hurt them. But at that moment, it was just the right thing to do. And I think also because maybe if both of us had been the same age, maybe if he was just a year or two older than me, maybe if he was as, naive as me, it wouldn't have worked out. But just for the fact that he was so much older, so much more mature, he, uh, uh, he gave me that strength to believe in our relationship. And he gave me a way forward for this relationship to blossom, that it gave me the courage to take that step. I wouldn't have, thinking back, done it even if I was madly in love with some other young boy. Today, when I think back, I think that is one of the important things. And as you said, at that time, it was, both my parents came from what is now Pakistan in during the partition in very disturbing circumstances. For them, even so much later, accept this relationship to with a different culture, a different religion, it probably their wounds became kind of exposed and raw again. It was very insensitive of me to have not thought of that. But hey, love is blind, that's what love is, and that's what you end up doing. I did hurt them, but it all sorted out the minute my daughter was born. It was like nothing wrong ever happened, and she's here, and I really love her for that also because she brought me back to my parents. Yes.
Dr. Singh, the initial years of when you get married, especially when you are as young as the two of you were when you get married, you're supposed to have a little bit of a extended honeymoon period. Unfortunately, for you, those were also very tumultuous years for the country and for you particularly, with everything that was going on in Kashmir and the sort of conundrums that you were faced with and the choices that you were having to make, political choices as well as personal choices. Could you tell us a little bit about those times? I mean, of course, that could be 6 hours at the very least, but the best you can do.
No, but before I tell you that, we must talk. No, you haven't talked about Syeda, Syeda and Askari.
I hope to end with
There's a poem. There's a poem which I recited in that film that my daughter made for me, which I want to recite to all of you. It's a poem by Yeats. When you are old and grey and full of sleep and nodding by the fire, take down this book and slowly read of the soft look your eyes had once and of their shadows deep. How many loved your moments of glad grace and loved your beauty with love false or true, but one man loved the pilgrim soul in you and loved the sorrows of your changing face. And bending down beside the glowing bars, murmur a little sadly how love fled and paced upon the mountains overhead and hid his face amid a crowd of stars. Askari and their love never fled as long as he was doing school. I knew him very well, and Syeda has always been an extremely uh, intelligent and very fine person to be with. I enjoy her company. And when she asked me about all these questions, I answered some of them very, very frankly. Now, to answer your point, if I may, I'm sorry for this interruption, but
No, not at all.
I couldn't let it go without reciting that poem.
Thank you.
One man loved the pilgrim soul in you. And the film that my daughter made is called Karan Singh, A Pilgrim Soul. Okay. Now, my daughter is here, by the way. Mm, You see, you are quite right. I became regent at the age of 18, just after we were married, or just before we were married, in fact. And it was a difficult period. Sheikh Abdullah was looming over all of us. He was the predominant figure at that time. And I was faced with a difficult choice. Jawaharlal Nehru was my mentor and my icon. But his view and my father's views couldn't have been more separate, because they belonged to two different worlds. My father, after all, was a feudal ruler. We claimed that our state was a little bigger than Hyderabad. I'm not sure about that. Hyderabad was much richer, but area-wise, because we had Gilgit and Baltistan and Aksai Chino. Anyhow, that's not the point. He was there, and Jawaharlal Nehru, of course, was a socialist, you know. So I was in this extremely excruciating position. Regent Sadhika, when Abdullah made a great song and dance about abolishing the monarchy. He'd been viscerally anti-Dogra all his life. So he had to make a song and dance. Monarchy to यूं ही खत्म हो रही थी. लेकिन he had a big illuminations in Kashmir and आज हम free हो गए ये वो. And then they abolished the monarchy, and then the Sadri Riyasat, the job came, and people, the Dogra said, how can you, after he has, as it were, insulted your father and had him forced out of the state, how can you go and accept Sadri Riyasat now, under him? It wasn't under him. Technically, I was head of state, but he was then the boss. It was a very difficult thing. Jawaharlal Nehru, on the other hand, I had breakfast with him. He talked about the new India, how the old structures had collapsed, and how a young man like me should become part of the new India that we were trying to build. You know, so I had this, and you're right, it was very difficult. Now, Asha stood with me, Asha I called her, all the time. Whatever I decided, not only that, she became extraordinarily mature after the first 2 or 3 years. And she had, let me tell you, a better political sense than I did. वो कहते ये आदमी तो क्रुक है जैसे आप बात कर रहे हो, तो बाद में मुझे 10 साल के बाद पता लगता है कि वो क्रुक है, उसको पहले ही पता लग जाता था. She had a tremendous political instinct, and so we got along. You know, we grew up together. We were doing our examinations. I was studying for my BA and MA. She was studying Prabhakar and Hindi की जो इम्तिहान थे. So it was a very extraordinary relationship. In a way, we were growing up together, studying together. She was learning English. Miss Mallinson used to come and teach her English, and then she learned the sitar, and I was doing my own thing. But it took us some time, I must admit, before we were really able to be, adjust to each other. Ultimately, we did, and I think it is more thanks to her than to me.
Coming back to you, Syeda. No, actually, before I do, there's a question. I'm so happy you recited that poem by it. But there's a question that Syeda puts in this monograph that she writes about you. That she talks about how wonderful you are with poetry and how great a memory you have for poetry. And she asks, she wonders rather, if that's one of the charms that you used to woo your Asha. So I'm going to, on her behalf, ask you that question now.
Poor Asha didn't have any choice. She had to marry me, whether I wooed her or not. But I don't think she also regretted. The greatest compliment ever paid to me was, we were in 1993, the centenary of Mahatma Gandhi's arrival in South Africa. And I was sent on behalf of the government of India. Asha and I went there. And Nelson Mandela had just been released. And there was a speech where he spoke and I spoke. After my speech, Nelson Mandela went up to Asha and tapped her on the back and said, "You are lucky to be married to this man." But what greater compliment could I have? But she was the happiest way to keep her happy. जो मेरी तारीफ कर दे ना, उसके पक्ष में हो जाती. The thing she liked best was to have somebody to praise me. But I must say one thing, Syeda, that bit about Gandhiji walking in, that was in a dream.
Yeah.
I hope that's become clear. There's one place where Gandhiji comes in. That was a dream I had. The first night I came to Delhi as Sadr Riyasat, they put me up in the Dwarka suite in Rashtrapati Bhavan. And I dreamt that I was standing in the middle of the room. The door opened and Gandhiji came in. I met him when he came to Kashmir, but here he was in crisp white clothes. He puts his left hand on my shoulder, takes my hand and he looks at it and says, "You will be a very wise man." So it's a dream. He actually.
It's a dream which you realize.
Well, I don't know whether it's for the audience to decide whether he was right or wrong. I can't say.
Gandhiji was seldom wrong. I think this just goes to prove that. But Syeda, I want to bring this back to you. I mean, you know, you've, from what I hear, you've had a wonderful relationship with. Am I audible? I'm sorry. This thing keeps great. You've had a wonderful relationship yourself with your husband, and then you've had the really fine fortune of sitting with these love stories that you've written. I wonder through this process what you made of what goes into a successful relationship, because we have the phrase happily ever after, and that's neither here nor there. There's no such thing as happily ever after, and we hell of a boring life if you were happy forever. But the success of the tasir of a successful relationship, what is that to you?
There are many, many things one can hold forth on, but I think a very, very basic thing, I think, is an interest and willingness to listen and to talk. Because I think very well brought up people very often have this habit of, "Oh, I'm having a problem, but I don't talk about it. I keep it to myself. I don't necessarily talk it even to my husband. If he cares enough, he'll notice." This is a sort of thing that is, you can't hear. Oh dear. Saying that unless there is a willingness to listen and a willingness to talk just as much as listen, it's over. It may be a lovely marriage in a social way and in many other ways, but the thing that keeps it going, I think, is the impulse to want to share the very first thing with your husband or with your wife. And you talk and you share and do it consistently and practically over everything that matters to either of you. I think that's important. One has thought very hard about it, obviously. So I think of a couple of more things I would say. One thing I think which mistakenly a lot of men who are in love with their wives do is spoil them. I think indulge them too much, overindulge people. I think that is disaster. That's something disastrous about us, because I've seen absolutely angelic women turn into monsters, and vice versa, by just sheer overindulgence. I think one has to actually watch out for that. So being in love is not an easy pie. I think it's got to be a thoughtful sort of thing, and I do believe that the talking bit is important, and of course, finally, mutual respect. I don't think marriages in India necessarily grant you that as a given. I mean, we're talking about people like us. We expect it and we get it, and if you don't have it, we fight for it. I don't think that's a norm in India. And I think we should worry about that. I mean, whatever influence we have, we should extend it to people, because to think of a woman or a man living in a lifelong relationship without that mutual arrangement of respect can be disastrous.
I think this is a great time for a short reading. I wonder what you'd pick.
Well, I had thought that, no, I was wanting to read out a couple of things which actually convey a really complete relationship up until here. I don't.
The heroine knew she had to be guarded while trusting her instinct. She had to ponder, think it through, not just take the plunge. Fortunately, Sharmila was not a stranger to the game, which was his life. She had always found cricket exciting, had more than a passing knowledge of the game, found the players attentive in the pavilion and admirable on the field. She was happy to accept an invitation after a match and listen avidly to talk of the day's game between tournaments. But Tiger, being different, won her. He did not say very much. He looked unmistakably stylish and unusual. You could barely hear what he said. His accent was not a familiar one, his humor even less so. Not affected or formal, but all his own. He had you figuring him out most of the time. You could not take him for granted. He had this habit of startling you. He has enough to be arrogant about, she thought, but is not. She liked that. His sense of humor was what floored me. There was a cool, rock-like ease, and yes, dependability. That was it, I think. Let us not forget that, by the time they met and courted, young Pataudi had put a lot away. Without fuss or fanfare, he had been a batting prodigy at Winchester in England, where he went to school. He had captained the school team, scoring 1,068 runs in 1959, beating the school record set by none less than Douglas Jardine way back in 1919. A fact that became more significant because Jardine, as cricketer, had been his father's arch rival. In the cricket arena, this is myth and cause for great pride for the Indian side, particularly since the BBC series Bodyline had so captivated audiences worldwide. The noob had made his first-class cricket debut playing for Sussex at 16 years of age, playing thereafter for Oxford while studying French and Arabic. The young man was quietly versatile too. He had won the school rackets championship with partner Christopher Snell. Sharmila's suitor had also established something else. At the start of his cricketing prime, he had met with an accident during driving back after dinner with a friend, Robin Waters, in Sussex, where they were playing a match. A car had hit Robin's Morris Minor even before he could start his vehicle or Tiger could fasten his safety belt. This threw Tiger right out through the windscreen. His injured right wrist caused the players much concern. He was expected to save his side the next day on the field by notching up runs. It was only in the early morning at Brighton Hospital that he discovered a glass shard off the windscreen of their car had caused an irreparable injury, and that no surgery could save for him the sight of his right eye.
This is what I consider, a kind of remarkableness in a person, where he's completely not undone by something so severely a handicap, and so severely a handicap in just the skill at which he is ace. I mean, it's difficult to explain it. And it must be wonderful for a wife to be able to live with a person like that and have him not put a single air on the subject. I mean, he dismissed it as though it happens to everybody. It's the same way as Dr. Karan Singh dismisses his not being able to be the fit person that he could be without the problems that he has with his leg. I mean, these people, I wanted to choose people like that, who just do rise above things. Everybody has something to rise above in their lives. But this is inspirational stuff, And it must be so much so for a highly talented actress who otherwise would have been a vain person. She was not, I think, it affected her, Rinku, in a way, to be what she is, because he was like that. So these are the sort of peculiar intricacies of relationships, and over the years, much more established, much more proven than when you start off. In the beginning, everybody, they were so glamorous, they were great. In a similar fashion, I'm not going to read it, but you've got to meet this couple, this man who has made chess India's property, as it were. I mean, Viswanathan Anand, for instance, is a person whose brain is really and completely outstanding, obviously. And it is so brilliant to see him play, and to see him play rapid chess, for instance, where he just is walking as though he's a film star from board to board to board to board to board, and he's winning each one. I mean, just what is the story? It's difficult, it's difficult to understand. And their relationship is absolutely magical. And I have to tell you, they were the toughest to manage because they're both extremely bright, extremely witty, but extremely shy. And so extracting the story from them was fun, but it was hard work.
You know, I'd hoped to ask you to read a lot more for the book, but on second thoughts, I'm going to leave everybody here to pick up a copy and read at leisure for themselves. I'm just going to do one final round of questions, so I'm not hogging these wonderful guests all to myself. And I'm going to start with you, Syeda. Most of the books, we were talking about successful relationships before we started this reading. And most of the stories in this book, I have to take recourse to that eventually. But most of the stories in this book are happily ever afters, to bring that phrase, that trite phrase back, but not all of them. And I was, of course, thinking about the Leans here, which is such a wonderful little story, and I wonder what made you pick it. And if you could tell us a little bit about the story, because there are a lot of people who still haven't read the book.
Well, I'm sure you'll find it one of the most enjoyable parts of the book, actually, because Leila Lean, David Lean's wife, was a Maharashtrian father and a Bengali mother's daughter who grew up in Hyderabad. And she considered herself more Hyderabadi than any one of us. And she was exotic looking. And I have to tell you that if she spent 10 or 15 or 20 minutes with any of you here, you would be besotted. She just had that quality. I can see Reva nodding her head because she's met her. So anyone who's met with her, I don't know what it is. It's an unreal quality, and I hope every one of us knows at least one person like that. She was amazing. And she had a very amazing life, and she talked about it endlessly. And that I could not have written about her, Pragya. I would have to roast in hell if I didn't. Because every time we met, which was very regularly, she was a classmate of my mother. So she felt she had a right over me, and she used to say, you have to do a book on me, and it has to be a novel. It can't be a short story, because there are 3 or 4 amazing loves in my life, and which they were. I mean, Salar Jang nearly married her. Salabat Jah, who was supposedly the actual Nizam, the very, very smashing looking Nizam, who I think the British had successfully displaced and so on, whatever. She was his very, very passionate beloved. And then she married because she was getting, the Nizam wanted her out of the state. She was thrown out of the state. She went to Bengal and Shanti Niketan, and there the most eminent artist, Tagore, not Rabindranath, but the nephew of his, fell in love with her. So she was an irrepressible person. And I can tell you that it would be impossible for anyone to resist her. And the amazing part was that when she got married to the suitable guy, which was a very, very high senior officer of the civil service in Indore, Maharashtrian, absolutely the right sort of lineage for the Matkars. She was extraordinarily unhappy, and she was heading for a nervous breakdown. She was heading for a nervous breakdown, and David Lean was researching for his Gandhi film. I mean, the coincidence of this was amazing, and the man came, and the man actually looked after her till she recovered from her semi-madness, actually. She was really severely affected. So it's an extraordinary story. And the thing is that it didn't last forever. it didn't last forever. And this is another thing I think the readership has to realize, that um, and love is not easy if there are other passions. And I think David Lean's passion was filmmaking, and Auntie Leela just couldn't cope with that. But mind you, she's also in the book because he looked after her. I mean, she had a Grosvenor House Hotel suite in which she lived, and when but the marriage was over. The marriage was over. So from that point of view, it's a slightly disqualified piece. But I think for the time that the 18 years that they were married, it was certainly his longest marriage. And I've seen them together, and I mean, he exuded a kind of devotion which in an Englishman is rare to see.
Um, like I said, last round of questions, I'm coming to you, Meera, and we'll end with Dr. Singh. You know, we were talking about what goes into, and I've been asking you very difficult questions about falling in love, and I'm going to ask you another difficult one. What goes into the making of a successful relationship? And I ask you this also because, you know, you were an ambitious, brilliant young architect when you met Muzaffar Saab, and once you got married, you devoted yourself to Kotwara. You and Muzaffar Saab have collaborated on films, on, of course, House of Kotwara, you know, your design house, and people can, you know, working together can be a blessing, but can also be an enormous challenge. I mean, it's adding another layer of complications to your relationship in one way. So, yeah, thoughts on that? What goes into keeping it going and making it a happily ever after?
Actually, the most difficult thing is to work together, and it's also the most beautiful thing, because if aesthetically you're aligned, and there are no challenges that one is throwing at each other because you think very opposite in aesthetics, and if you are willing to give each other that little space which is called respect, and if you are willing to accept your mistakes and say yes, I'm sorry, and if you are open to criticism, I know these are a lot of ifs, but only if is positive can you work together. And fortunately for Muzaffar and me, it fell into place without because you see, when we started, when we got married, just before we got married, he took me to Kotwara, and he said that this is where my roots are, and if you can make a life out of this place, um, we have a big future together. He just said that straight. I was all of 26, and I am an architect, and Kotwara is Muzaffar's father was the Raja of Kotwara, which is in the Tarai region of Awadh, 100 miles from Lucknow, and unfortunately, my father-in-law passed away soon after we got married, so I couldn't get to spend much time with him. But Muzaffar was very deeply concerned about Kotwara, and he had grown up there. For him, it had very special memories. So, instead of looking at it like, oh my God, what am I going to do here? It became a challenge. What is it that we can do here to make this place come alive again? And I think because for him it was a dream, as you will read from the book, he was, already married twice before, and he had obviously been in love and had beautiful relationships with his earlier wives, but none of them had the inclination or the time to spend in Kotwara with him, and I don't blame them. Also, he was not ready at that time in his life to turn back to Kotwara. He was making films, he was in Bombay, he was here, he was there, he was in Calcutta, he was with Air India, he was with advertising. So, you know, it wasn't aligned. But when we got married, he was just returning bruised and battered from Kashmir with his film Zuni having got stalled. And so he was looking for something to do, me with my design background. So we made Kotwara a mission to do something which we could, help the people create, a skill development program, create employment. So we started with something called Dwar Pe Rozi, employment at doorstep for the people there. So it's a very long story and a very long journey, but I think because we started a project together and we created it from scratch, it was like, the building blocks just kept adding on, and we kind of managed to work together. And the most important thing I realized very early in our marriage was that every time we would have an argument, we would get over it within 5 minutes. Argue, shout, scream, call each other names, come kill each other, whatever you had to do. But then in 5 minutes it was over. So you never go to bed with a bad feeling, never wake up in the morning thinking, oh God, how am I going to cover this, this gap distance I have created. And that was a very important thing, and very important for working also, because you have arguments, you don't agree, but you put it behind you and you move on. That's the most important thing. So all the ifs kind of added up to a positive.
Mira, there's something that Syeda mentions in this story, that when you were getting married, there were any number of people saying this is a terrible idea, and in the middle of that, there was a friend who said, make sure if you're going to marry him that you become indispensable to him. I wonder what you made of that sentence at that point in time and what you make of it now.
There's कहावत कि कोई अच्छी चीज़ होती है उसको अपनी गिरा में बांध के रख लेते हैं. So that's what I did. I tied a knot with that thought and just into the pallu of my sari or dupatta, and I have actually, that has stayed with me throughout. And this friend who said that to me is still my best friend, and she's still Muzaffar's best friend. And I think, because we started creating things together, it became such that we were indispensable. But because Bim is here today, I want to say one thing, Bim. I got married in a Fab India kurta.
No, I must tell you, I wanted her to wear today, and then I thought to myself, it's a Fab India pink kurta, and she's much more used to now her own fashions.
I would have worn it without even one moment of hesitation if I could find it.
Yeah, it was pink and blue. I remember that now. Dr. Singh, I'll end with you. You've written a wonderful book about, before being a feminist was perhaps in fashion for men, you were a feminist and are a feminist, and you've written a wonderful book about, your encounters with wonderful women. And, that for a lot of us women of this generation, it's a dream to marry a man who's a feminist. I wonder what was Asha's role in how you understood women, and what went into the making of you being a feminist when it wasn't quite all that popular?
Well, that's an interesting question, but I have no clear, immediate answer. Asha was very good at making friends. And most of the people that I've written about in meetings with remarkable women also knew Asha. So she facilitated my meetings with a lot of these women. They were not, as I said, there was no romantic liaison anywhere, but they were interesting, intelligent women. And my mother was always a major force in my life. She was a village woman. She was not a princess. She came from a small village in Himachal Pradesh called Bijaypur. Nobody's ever heard of it. It's just beyond Lambagram. And she was my father's fourth wife. And, there was no issue from the first three. And so they say, I was born in France, that's a different story. I've written it up. But my mother's influence on me was very strong. Now, that may be one of the reasons why I always had good relations with women, particularly, if I may say so, with women who were older than me. You know, not with very young women, but with women who were older than me. And I was very young at the time. So all those women, I've always felt that women have been mistreated. My mother used to say कि ये राजा महाराजाओं ने इतना तंग किया है औरतों को, एक दिन ये सब भोगेंगे. When she was in a bad mood, and they did bhogo ultimately. So I much preferred her. My father, of course, was very austere and very distant and very powerful, and he's the Maharaja and all. But women have always played an important role in my life. My mother until I was married, and Asha after I was married. So in a way, if you call me a feminist, it's true. I've had closer relationships with women than I've had with men. I've had good friends, but women I respect, like Helen Keller. You know what she did? She came to Kashmir. I met her at the airport. Can you imagine? She put her hands over my face and said, "Handsome."
How sweet.
Can you imagine Helen Keller saying that? Those are the sort of women, and these are iconic women. Or von Graf, the last disciple of Jung, who was a great psychologist in her own right. So these sort of women, Nilofer, आपके हैदराबाद की princess Nilofer, was so unhappy. आके माँ जी के पास रोती थी. Such a beautiful woman she was. One of the most beautiful women I've ever met in my life was Princess Nilofer. Very unhappily married to that frightful man. Sorry to use the phrase. But then he wouldn't give her a divorce. Jawaharlal Nehru had to intervene and force him to give her a divorce. And finally she married an American and was happy towards the end of her life. So these were the sort of women I've written about. And yes, you could call me a feminist if you like.
Well, I do. Thank you, all of you. I'm going to end this now and hand the mic over to Priya, who has a couple of words to say. Thank you. No, that's fine. I'm Priya Kapoor of Roli Books, and I just wanted to say that earlier this evening, Syeda said that we were a very elegantly patient publisher, but who says no to Syeda, right? As all of you know. So thank you all for coming. The turnout this evening is really all the love and admiration we have for Syeda. Dr. Karan Singh, it was an honor to have you. Pragya, thank you so much. Meera, since this is a book about love, and we are allowed to get a little giddy once in a while about love, I met my husband while we were working on a book together with Meera. So Meera will always be very special as an author to me. And Syeda, finally, thank you so much for your patience and for trusting us with your book. Pragya, I'm always in awe as how, with ease, you switch between geopolitics, love, music, culture, so thank you. And Olive and Sula, thank you so much. Thank you all for coming. Please enjoy the evening. Thank you.